Welcome to another installment of the bed build. Okay, today, so I've got all my parts cut. There are a few parts need to be just dialed in as for size, but they're the small pieces. And so today, because I've got all the pieces stained, they don't have a finish coat on them. I'm going to use a polyurethane finish coat, but I need to do some assembly before I can do that. And the reason is I'm going to do an oak trim on this, so I want to finish the trim at the same time as I finish the plywood. So it has to be assembled, and you'll kind of see that as I go. So what I need to do is I need to get some rabbets and some dados going in these great big panels. This is the platform of the bed. This is the bed at the bottom of the two cabinets. Of course, this bed is going to be separated into two cabinets. So there's going to be sides on each that go the full length. So those are going to be rabbeted on the sides. So there's nothing to cut here because it's the sides that I'm going to rabbet. But I need to run a full length dado in each one of these panels to separate the two sections. And this is the head section, this is the foot section. The foot section is slightly larger than the head section. And the reason for that is my containers that I want to fit in here, in these cabinets, are a predetermined size. So of course they're not, 1/4 the size of the length of the bed, which is fine because at the head of the bed normally you have a nightstand, so you're not going to be able to use that storage space anyway. So that'll be dead space. That'll be a place to hide your valuables perhaps, which again in my case will be empty. So this will be divided in half. The large one will be divided in half, and then the small piece at the head will have a dado, a groove actually, if you want to be technical. They'll have a groove run off center, so I'll have to measure out and make sure that goes in the right place. Normally I'd run these through the table saw. I would love to do them in the table saw. I can't see controlling pieces this size on the table saw. One of the big problems when you're using a dado blade, when you run your material through, it tends to not want to sit down on the table saw. You have to have pressure the whole time on the material to hold it down on the dado blade. Otherwise, the dado blade is not going to cut your dado a uniform depth. So I'm going to do this with the router, and I don't do this with the router very often, so it's going to take me a bit of setup to get the router. Things are always complicated by the fact that a lot of plywood is not 3/4 inch wide. This is 11/16 of an inch. So what has to happen is you need to cut that dado in two passes. You can buy dado blades, dado bits for your router that will cut 11/16. I don't have a set like that. I don't do this very often, so it's pointless. So what I do is I'll use a bit that's smaller, probably 1/2 inch, and I do two passes. So I'll run one down one side, and then I'll size it. I'll move it over and size it to run down the other side. Hopefully I do that correctly. It'll fit in there snug, not too tight, not too loose. A little bit of glue, some screws through from the other side, and Bob's your uncle at that point. So let's do this. So it's always nice to have some good layout tools. Here's my center finding tape. I've showed this before. Close up of it. And what this is I can use this without even knowing and doing any math as far as the center of this goes. I can measure the length. So this is 41.5 inches wide. Okay? And what I can do then is, because here we go, 40 41.5. So I can measure this as 41.5 on this scale. This is a regular scale on top. Well, on the bottom, it's half as wide. So what we have here is I can go to 41.5 here, and then that'll give me exactly halfway across this piece of plywood. Now, 41.5, that's pretty easy math, but regardless, it makes it super easy. And the next thing I did was I simply took my plywood here that I'm going to use. This is not the piece I'm using for this divider, but it's the type of material. And then I just simply use my trusty pencil and drew a line there on each side. So I didn't even measure that to be 11/16. When I start cutting this, I'll use the piece itself to dial in the exact width that I need to use. I don't need these great big layout lines, but when I start doing this, this will really help me to not make any mistakes. So in order to extend these layout lines, I simply use my combo square against there, draw the lines up so that I've got a bit of a line that I can see. The pencil mark is a little bit obscured by the stain and the grain of the plywood. This is a really nice layout square too, combo square I should say. It's a Starrett square. It's just highly accurate and very well made combo square. I don't use it often these days, but if you need something like that, a Starrett combo square is worth the investment, I believe. So now what I need to do is I'll likely make the same kind of a mark on the other end, and so that when I lay this out, I don't make any mistakes over there. I don't want my divider going crooked across here. And then I use this measurement, and I measured for the other one because the head end platform, the head end cabinet is not symmetrical. This side is smaller. So that's what I'm doing right there. So we're getting closer to cutting this up. Okay, so I've got my first cut set up here, and I've decided to use the material that will make up the divider itself as a straight edge. I'm confident that it's pretty straight. I've cut that on the table saw. Those cuts are very accurate. It's going to be straighter than a piece of lumber. I don't have a metal straight edge or anything that's that long. I actually have a nice metal straight edge clamp that would go the other direction on here, but not this way. This will work great. And so what I've set it up with is my straight cutting, 1/2 inch straight cutting bit here. And this router's not plugged in, so I'm daring to touch the bit. And I've got a collar. So I've got the straight bit with the collar. This is actually a top bearing, what they call a flush trim bit, but I'm not using that feature of it. It's got a bearing on the top that would run on the material. The problem there is by the time I raise the bit enough, and this is upside down, so when I say raise I mean that way. By the time I raise the bit enough to make my groove, the bearing doesn't really touch the straight edge. So I've just put this collar in here, and I've measured the difference between the collar and the bit, which is about 1/16. So what I've done there is over on my workpiece, is I've measured from my straight edge to just inside my line. You remember when I stood that plywood up here to draw that line, so now the line is outside the plywood, so I don't want to cut the line. So I need to measure from the inside of the line to the straight edge, which is 1/16. Now theoretically, I should be able to run the router on here, cut down there. I've set my depth, and the depth I've set at less than half the width, the thickness of this material. I don't need a real deep groove here. It's just to locate that piece, and it makes a nice finished edge as opposed to just a butt joint there. One thing I learned when I was beginning woodworking, one thing I learned the hard way when I was beginning woodworking, doing this kind of thing, is make sure you set this clamp back far enough that it doesn't interfere with the router. I've checked that already. So I'm going to sneak up on this, make a little cut, and then we'll see how it works out. So this shows me that gives me exactly what I want. That was my depth. It's not quite 5/16 deep. That's fine. That's almost an arbitrary depth. For that, the only thing that's going to register off of that depth is the width of this panel, the height of this panel, which is actually this panel here. This is what's going in this dado. So you can see that a second pass will be needed here to bring that to 11/16 wide. You could probably see better than I can. I have to place down pressure on this just to make sure it's tight to this work surface, workpiece, so that the depth of my groove is going to be correct and uniform. Move this cord over here. Now starting up in this is always a bit dicey. Some people will say, oh, you went the wrong direction, it's a climb cut, blah, blah, blah. When you're making a single cut like that, it's a climb cut on one side and not on the other, so it doesn't matter which way you go. But when I do the other one, then I want to make sure I go the correct direction, which on the bit, you want to make sure your feed direction is against the bit this way, which is going to be on this side. Right? So this would be the correct direction to go from here. So I'll have to go from this side back. If you come the other way, the bit will be chewing with the feed. You always want to chew against the feed direction. So I'll change this around, and then I'll make another cut. Okay, so I've got my straight edge changed to the other side here. Now this is where the rubber meets the road. My first cut was, didn't have to be exact. I mean, it had to be as exact as I can make it. But this really has to be dialed in. And what I need to go for is the width of my material is 11/16. You maybe can't see that. Width of the material is 11/16. My collar on the router is 1/16. So we take 11/16 plus 1/16, we're back to 3/4. So from this edge here to my straight edge should be the width of my material plus the offset of my collar. So what I'll do is I'll route this in an inch or so, then I'm going to check my fit.
You can see a very tiny offset here between the two cuts. That is not going to amount to a hill of beans. However, that's an illustration of the difference between this material being tight against that and it not being so. I'm going to test this fit. And that's snug. It goes in there. When you do a long assembly like this though, if it's too snug, you just can't do it. I don't know, I think I'll cut that and I'll try that fitment again. I can always sneak it away and do another cut if I'm unhappy with it. I'm going to do a climb cut at the other end, just so I can check the fitment over here. And you can do climb cuts, you just got to really hang on and be prepared for it. See, that's going to go in there. You notice I'm going a lot faster than I was with the first cut, and that's because I'm cutting probably less than half of the material that I was cutting the first go around. You can blow this out with an air gun if you want. Sometimes I do. It gets a lot more dust in the air. I'm not a fan of wearing my dust mask in the shop. I don't like to wear it. It's just uncomfortable. Not that I shouldn't wear it. But if you sweep the sawdust, it just makes it less dusty in the shop. You see how that sits up? Well, there's no way to really secure that. One thing you can do is run a length of two-sided tape to hold that down. Now, if I just provide down pressure on the router, that will sufficiently give me the clearance I need. You can't bank that these collars are perfectly round or perfectly centered. So your distance from there to the bit could be different on this side than this side. So, you know, routing with one side against the guide is best. The same side against the guide, I should say. You'll see another problem here. See how that bottom is not the same both ways, both sides. That starts quite a ways back. And that's, you know, a mistake. That shouldn't have happened. I'm not going to change that because for two reasons. The only way to change it, really, I mean, you could lay something in there, but is to cut this down, flush it. There's no reason to do that. My material will still sit down in here properly to a proper depth, and there's going to be a trim piece on the end, so you're never going to see that. But that is a problem, and this is a problem with routers. The bit in the router sometimes will work its way down. I suspected that was happening, but I didn't check on it soon enough. Okay, so these are the ends, or the sides of the cabinets. So each cabinet has two sides and one divider. So these are the sides. And I'm once again going to use my center finding tape. I don't have to. It's fun to use. And again, you can see that's 74 inches long, and I can come back here and mark 74 inches as my center point. I could measure that out to get my groove, or I can just use some of my material. I'm not building an airplane here. So use some of my material, I'll mark it just on the end here. I don't know where this end is, so the error will increase as you go away from the line on this end. So there, I've got that, and then I can, here's a tip. I'll have to do this backwards so you can see. You want to take this line and extend it with your square. You set your square up to it and then draw the line. Don't do that. Put your pencil on the line, keep it at a consistent attitude toward the material, slide your square up to it, and then draw your line. Okay, so put it on the line, slide your square up to it, and draw the line. Because then you know exactly where your line's going to be. Okay, so this happens exactly the same way the other one did. I have 3 of them here, need to be cut exactly the same. So I'm going to clamp this here just like I did before. I'm going to do it by eye for this side. These are the compromises when you use your table saw for a workbench. Should be square if I bring it flush from the edge, shouldn't it? If it isn't, you've got different problems. Okay, use a combo square right on there, like that, to set the depth. So what I need to do is I need to go 3/4 inch. My straight edge here is 11/16 thick. So if I want 11/16 overall, I would just skim the surface, so I need to go 11/16 and then add some. Okay, so now I can unlock the adjustment, rotate the base until we've got it right there. Okay, tear it down and reset it. There's so much I don't like about doing rabbits and dados this way, but I don't have much choice. It's a lot of work. Did you notice on that cut the router was pulling a little bit? Just a little. It's a very shallow cut. Not a big deal at all. But that's a climb cut. That I was going the wrong way. The bit was chewing into the new material instead of cutting against it. And that's why you want to avoid a climb cut. You can make climb cuts all you want, if you know what you're doing and you know what to expect. Looks like that'll fit. Oh yeah, that's just right. Little trick. If you get to assembly and it doesn't quite fit, you just start sanding this edge, just this corner. You can round that corner actually to make it slide down in there. So that takes care of all the grooves and the dados. Let's recall that a dado goes across the grain and a groove goes with the grain. That's not really so much important in this project, but it can be important in certain contexts. So next time I'm going to be running rabbets on some of these pieces. I've got them marked out already. I'll be doing a 3/4 inch rabbet on one side, 11/16 on the other. The top plywood on this bed is going to be 3/4 inch spruce plywood, and the rest of it is the oak plywood. The spruce is a real 3/4 inch, the oak is 11/16. Makes a little bit of a pain in calculations and diagrams and cuts and whatnot, but it is what it is. So hope you're looking forward to the next video, and we might even get out the glue bottle, who knows. Take care, have fun.